I'm interested in the state of mind or state of consciousness, or maybe you should say altered state of consciousness, immediately prior to, during, and immediately after an abduction experience. Linda may have touched on an aspect of it with the dreams. And maybe I should be asking this to the abductees themselves. And if you can answer the question, I wish you would, if the panelists can't. The accounts that I have read, when I read them, I get the idea or the impression of a dream state, or at least my dream states. And the particular curious thing is, which is like my dream states, I don't think the ridiculous things in my dreams are ridiculous until I wake up and think about them with my conscious mind. And I get this from, that this is possibly the case, seems to be the case in the abduction experience. And I would just like for someone to talk about that some, either you all or the actual.
Yeah, I'd like to start it and then see who wants to jump in. In the West, we have a very limited number of words for different states of consciousness. In Eastern thinking and religion, there may be 50, 80, 100 words for the different possible states. We have conscious, unconscious, dream, sleep. We have hypnagogic states, which means the state when you're falling asleep, and hypnopompic when you're waking up, and that sort of in-between state. And that's about it. I guess you can have stupor if you're, you know, we really very limited in what we know. Now, this phenomenon forces us to think about subtleties, and you know we don't like to think about subtleties. So, high percentage of people will remember until they've had a chance to explore their abductions as dreams. Okay. Now, when they call it a dream, is it a dream that recollects an abduction? Is it an abduction they're calling a dream? There's all kinds of ways the word dream is used. It was just an experience that happens at night. You call it a dream because that's the way you were raised to think. What I mentioned this afternoon, and I want to stress it, if you take an abduction experiencer through the night of an experience, there is that moment of truth when they realize they weren't really asleep when this happened. There's a sort of like, you went to bed, and it's very important to go, you know, reconstruct the events of the night. Like, okay, what time did you go to bed? And you're watching television, and you went to bed, and then what happened? And then this light came in. Now, but you didn't say you fell asleep, and that's a moment of truth. And at that moment, a shift in consciousness occurs. It's not as if they're just like an ordinary waking consciousness. One of the people that Bud and I have worked with in New York describes, it's as if the aliens come through a screen. They break through, it's like a scrim, which is the screen in the theater. It's as if they shatter one reality and come into this reality. The person is not asleep, but they're in another state of consciousness, but they're fully present in that state of consciousness, but it's a different state of consciousness. So it's a true experience, but in another state of consciousness. And we don't have language for that. So that's just a starter. But this is a very important and very interesting subject, a very good question.
Clark, I'd like to say something, having had the experience and also having worked with and listened to many, many other people with the experience. In one instance, when I had a daytime encounter, I was in an altered state before I knew I was having an encounter. It was almost technologically precise. I was walking from a neighbor's yard to my yard, and when I stepped, I was perfectly fine on this side of the line. I took a step over an invisible barrier, which immediately put me into an altered state before I even saw the ETs. So I felt it was very much an imposed, external, technologically produced state of mind, so that when I looked up and saw the little beings there in the yard, I didn't freak. I did not act as I would have normally. My normal state of consciousness was very much dampened, and there was surprise. There wasn't shock and fainting. The same thing seems to happen with other people. No matter, there's a change in how you normally would react, and I think it's imposed. in some very external technological way. For instance, one abductee who was very upset about things that had happened with him and had said, the next time I get my little hands around their little necks, I'm going to smash them in the face. I'm really mad about this. They're not going to do me this way anymore. And he had a house guest staying at his house, and when the house guest was asleep in the living room on the sofa, the host woke up in the middle of the night for no apparent reason and looked down the hallway and saw the little blue light probe that had been in his house several times before during experiences or before the onset of one. He saw this bobbing over the head of the person who was sleeping in his living room on the couch, and he had just said, not 3 days before, if I ever see him again, I'm going to give him this. He looked up and said, oh, I know what that is, out to sleep. The next morning was doubly furious. He had been thwarted in what he would have normally and naturally wished to do. So it seems like there's an imposed state, not perhaps dream state at all. It's just something that dampens our normal response, and that's how it feels, really. And it's in the daytime. You know you're not sleeping when you're walking and talking and driving and cooking and so on. So it's not like the dream state feels.
I'd like to ask our esteemed panel of broad experience here a question perhaps you can't answer completely, but give us some contributions from your experience to compare and contrast the information we're putting together on abductions, meaning force by not giving you free will, however you want to call that, versus the contact voluntarily where there's no force. What are we learning from these two? Are we getting similar data, conflicting data, and how is it coming about? Can you contrast and show the conflictions and contrast on this?
To start to answer that question, I think it's important to know who comes to us. People who are coping, people who maybe remember things consciously or feel they are contactees may never come to us for any kind of help. So it's kind of skewed in terms of the population that we may see. We see the people who are confused, anxious, sleepless, irritable, all those more traumatic responses. And so they may see themselves more as abducted and terrorized or something like that, at least to start with. So I think that was an important distinction in terms of comparison. I would like to talk to a lot of people who perhaps call themselves as contactees and have maybe more positive experiences just for that comparison, but I think so much of what I do see comes because it comes to the label of trauma, at least initially. I do want to add that through my research that I would say about 50% end up feeling positive about it and about 50% don't, even though at first they may have come for that indeed initial traumatic release that they need to work through.
Well, one of the things that I know in letters and audio cassettes people have sent me, that probably the second emotion after fear is anger, and that there is a pattern in the people who feel that their will has been violated, that they've been raped, or there's a kind of a syndrome there. I think it's also interesting that there are several men that have corresponded and I have interviewed and talked with who you were talking about will and versus violation or will, or those who felt like that they had consciously acquiesced to do something versus those who felt that they had no choice. Well, there is a couple of interesting twilight areas here that seems to involve both. And in men, one of these patterns that I've heard over and over again is where they feel in the beginning that they're having a sexual encounter with a pretty blonde woman or something. And they are happy and willfully involved in this action. And then you will hear them, it's one or two versions I've heard. They suddenly, the blonde woman who they thought they were in a sexual relationship with is suddenly replaced by either a gray that's floating above them because they feel no physical pressure, and or they suddenly see clearly whether the phenomenon releases this or there's something that the human mind and spirit forces through this wall. They see the tubes and the machines that are hooked up to their genitals. At that moment, they feel complete and total humiliation and rage. Now, I've seen that pattern, and one man just 3 nights ago who has had this happen to him several times, he called because he's been going through a ebb and flow, a vacillation between I am finally getting ready to deal with them on a conscious level. I am going to break through this strange state. And he called the other night to tell me that he was waked up and he knew he was totally conscious and that there was a golf ball size glowing white light in the bedroom which he saw move what he estimated to be about 5 feet through the air. But he said that he was struck with a terror that was as deep and abiding as anything he'd ever experienced before. Well, just a week or so before, he had said, I am ready for conscious encounter. Now, there's something about these golf ball size, baseball size, softball size lights for, I'm sure, all of us here and those of you out there. It is prevalent throughout the abduction literature and the experiences. And I've wondered, are they some kind of an advanced TV, telephone communication system? It's come in place to make some kind of communication. And yet, I know more abductees are so terrified of these glowing light balls, and the few that have relaxed into a place eventually after they've come and gone, they get some kind of communication from them. So what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to this issue of saying they want an experience, the phenomenon seems to come back with something that would seem to be now up front, center, and conscious. But we all still seem to have a great deal of difficulty even dealing with a ball of light.
I would like to say about the contact and abduction division that for the working purpose, I think you'd need to define what those things are. And an abduction is where someone is taken forcibly or against their will, and a contact is where you have an exchange of information where nobody is forced to do anything. It's easy to say the two things are not alike, and the same things can happen within one person's experience. Now, there are those who do think they have gone willingly once the intrusion is started, but if you remember how artificially and technologically easy it is for these people to change our moods and change our minds and change our even our sensory input from pain to pleasure, from fear to love, instantaneously, then we don't really know when we go by ourselves if we're going willingly or if we're going because we've been made to feel we're going willingly. So I tend to say if they don't take you anywhere under any conditions, you've had a contact. If they've taken you anywhere, you've had an abduction. Because a contact is simply a talk, an exchange.
I don't remember being taken, just like I don't remember being dropped off. I was asleep when it happened.
She may have been dreaming, but Amy Rylance says she didn't imagine it when a spaceship landed in her front yard and took her away.
Do you believe in aliens or UFOs?
I do now. I definitely do now.
I believe in it now because I've seen it and I know what I saw.
Amy's friend Petra was also in the house that night and claims she was woken by a bright light.
I've seen Amy in front of me on a beam of light being carried out of the living room window into a really huge ship outside.
The only evidence this happened, a torn curtain and a burnt bush, apparently singed by the bright light which carried sleeping Amy out the window.
No, I don't drink. I don't take drugs at all. I'm just a normal person.
So what was your reaction when you saw this? What did you do? Did you reach out to help her?
No, I couldn't. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it, and I fainted.
Next to wake up was Amy's husband, Keith.
I freaked out completely. I went mental, running around, screaming for her. But after I believed Petra, which I did after about 5 minutes, I called the police.
The only physical evidence I have are the marks from the tests that they did on me.
What sort of tests?
Just getting kind of DNA samples, and they didn't do anything bad to me, so it was wholly a good experience from my point of view.
Amy and Keith say no one can explain how she was taken from Maryborough in southern Queensland and ended up in Mackay in North Queensland, a distance of 800 kilometres, in 3 hours in the middle of the night.
So it doesn't matter if we were all on hallucinogenic drugs and drinking, that still wouldn't put Amy 800 kilometres away. They're never going to acknowledge the existence of aliens.